Okay, let's get started. Thank you so much, Laura, for your introduction. I just wanted to introduce myself and then have my colleagues introduce themselves as well. My name is Julia Chun. I am the Global Director of Education at Avenues, the World School.
And I am Rebecca Strauss. I am the Director of Curriculum Design at Avenues, the World School.
And I am Amy Young. I am the head of school for Avenues Online, the virtual campus of Avenues, the World School. Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. I actually wanted to kick off things by saying one really very important thing. In our talk today, we're going to discuss some of the strengths, but also some of the pain points of distance learning. And I'm sure that's why some of you might be here today. And looking at the survey, I think that is why many of you are here today. But I do want to underscore that this particular time in history has just been unprecedented, right? Nobody's lived through anything like this before. And there was little to no time to prepare for the mass closings of schools. Educators, families, students have all had to pivot in really unexpected ways. And I just want to emphasize that everyone has done an amazing job in a very short span of time. So if any critiques or criticism comes forward, it really is to learn from it, to highlight it, to learn from it so that we can move forward in more productive ways. So just felt like I needed to say that. Okay, so let's definitely get started. Amy, are you driving?
I am.
Okay, so let's move to the first slide.
So I have the first slide up. Can you see the first slide?
Oh, I'm sorry, the second slide.
Oh, the second slide.
Yep, thank you so much.
Amy, I think I'm seeing your screen versus, Julia's sharing. Oh no, Amy's screen. There you go, perfect.
Whoa, whoa, sorry. We're gonna go back. Sorry about that. There we go.
Okay, so like I said, schools have had to prepare very quickly for distance learning. So since March 17th, 43 states, 4 US territories, and the District of Columbia have ordered or recommended school building closures for the rest of the academic year. And this in the United States has affected approximately 45 million students. I know we have some folks from the UK, so just add on to that 45 million students. Just globally, millions and millions of students have been affected by this global pandemic. And thus, teachers have had to migrate their in-person classes to a virtual space very quickly, right? Folks are utilizing platforms like Zoom, Google Classroom. At Avenues, we have an LMS, a learning management system called Canvas that kids had been using. But suddenly, you know, what had been sort of a way to check in on homework and assignments has suddenly now been sort of the main vehicle to communicate with students and families. And because of this, you know, there have been real challenges in the ability for teachers to do the work of school, right? At Avenues, we really pride ourselves on student-centered discussions as sort of the heart of one of our pedagogies. And we're a project-based learning school, so kids are doing group work all of the time. And you know, technology just limits the ability for teachers to be able to do that kind of work with students. It's been really challenging for teachers to provide students with real-time feedback. What was once just a check-in that you could see kids and like look over their shoulders and check in on how it's going, it's super challenging with technology, right? You lose that day-to-day sort of check-in time. And so that has really affected sort of how teachers interact with their students. Middle and upper grade students on average have had about 4 to 6 individual classes per day to attend, which is a lot, right? So if you can imagine, each class represents anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour of class time, and then multiply that out by how many classes they have, that's a lot of time in front of a screen. And then children in primary grades who may have just 1 or 2 teachers have had to spend many, many more hours than they normally would in front of a device. I've heard in the past, like parents of young children are like, oh, we have limits, no more than half an hour on the iPad. Now kids are having to spend 2 hours, 3 hours on the iPad to attend classes. And those of you that have young children in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, the attention span just, you can't have kids at that age on the screen for more than, I would say, between 5 and 10 minutes at a time. They've been very adaptive, and kids, are flexible, but it becomes really onerous for kids of that age to be on a screen for that amount of time. Also, teachers really haven't been able to coordinate their classes. Like I said earlier, we had to pivot very, very quickly. So you can imagine you're a teacher learning these new platforms, having to deliver instruction really, really quickly in a virtual space. Teachers really haven't had the time to coordinate their classes with one another. And so oftentimes workloads for students have been really spotty, right? There are kids that are getting giant workloads because teachers haven't had the opportunity to talk about, well, I'm assigning this amount of homework, I'm assigning this amount of homework, which then translates into hours and hours and hours of homework for some students. And I already talked about how for the younger students, just understanding what the right amount of time for a younger student to be in front of technology has been really tough for teachers. What we've found from talking to students at Avenues is that daily in-class assignments can feel really compliance-y to students. And like I said before, we do a lot of project-based learning. Extended projects, oftentimes like at school, we would have kids do projects that would last anywhere from 2 to 4 to 6 weeks. But those kinds of projects can feel really limitless and boundless to students. One of the reasons why teachers are doing these in-class assignments is because, we've asked teachers to be accountable for their students' learning during this time. And this is often translated into teachers assigning lots of work to ensure that their classes are viewed as rigorous, right? And then in that project-based learning space, if a project is given out by a teacher, it's really challenging for teachers to keep track of students' progress on longer projects. There just isn't that informal check-in time. So, if students get off-piste or if they really get off track, it may be a week, it may be 2 weeks before the teacher really understands, the student really understands that they are off track. And then to rein it back in, to self-correct, do all of that kind of stuff is really, really challenging and sometimes heartbreaking for students. So that's been tough. And then lastly, and if you have school-age children, this, students and families are having to navigate multiple apps, websites, and programs at a time. Most students are having to jump back and forth between 3 to 6 apps and or platforms per day. Everyone has said a singular platform would be ideal. If we could give them a one-stop shop so technology doesn't become an obstacle to learning. If you're a parent of younger students, that a single platform would be really perfect because they're often, parents are oftentimes the ones that have to be the tech support for their children. You're trying to be tech support and you're trying to balance your job and you're trying to feed all the kids and clean up after them. It gets super challenging. With our older students, we're finding that the myriad of websites is really overwhelming. So teachers are oftentimes giving these lists of really curated resources, and the resources are great, right? They're websites like National Geographic and American Museum of Natural History, Facing History, Gilder Lehrman, a myriad of websites, but it's not just a one click. So you get a giant list of websites and then it's click, 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 click to find exactly what you need. And students are having to navigate that, and it's been super challenging for them. So I'm actually going to stop there and I'm going to pass it along to Rebecca because she's going to talk a little bit about online learning and how it's different.
So one of the things that I think is really important to emphasize is the experience that we are all having right now with distance learning is actually really different from online education that is designed to be delivered online. Right? The position that we're in is that teachers have had to take a curriculum and a program of study that's really meant to be delivered in a brick and mortar setting, and then use an off-the-shelf tech tool that was not custom designed for that curriculum and try to funnel it through that to deliver it virtually. It's really a square peg in a round hole. And that is not in any way to diminish the incredible work that I have seen teachers do. I think it is so impressive what people have been able to pull off in these circumstances. It's really remarkable. But it is also, of course, ceaselessly frustrating and understandably so. And I think There's only so much success that one can ever hope for under that model because, as I say, it's a bit of a square peg round hole problem. The curriculum simply was not designed to be delivered through a virtual medium, and as a result, there is always going to be a mismatch there. The difference between that model and online education is that online education is actually designed to be delivered online, right? So from the outset, that curriculum actually was developed with the idea of a virtual delivery system. So that's the difference that I kind of want to emphasize. And that's really what I think our online campus at Avenues the World School captures so remarkably well. A great deal of attention was paid to the design of that curriculum and thinking about what it means to deliver it online, right? What are those differences? What are those key research-informed principles that we can utilize to create the best possible virtual learning experience? And that includes a whole range of things, from how units of study might fit together across subject areas. So as Julia was kind of describing, that experience that so many middle and high school students are having right now of juggling 4 to 7 courses, and each one has a separate teacher, and each teacher has their own idiosyncratic way of doing things. Well, that might work in a brick and mortar setting, but online it is unbelievably overwhelming. And all of the onus is on the student to navigate that. Right? So you want to make sure that those units of study that you're building really are synced and coordinated across academic subject areas to create consistency, which makes it a lot easier for students and for teachers, for that matter, to navigate that coursework. It also helps facilitate better collaboration because then all of the students are interacting with the material through the same lens. And so are the teachers. So teachers can really co-teach much more effectively when that kind of consistency and coordination is in place. And then finally, I think the other thing that a really well-designed, intentionally online curriculum can do is work to set expectations and ensure a balanced workload. And we've heard that from our students at Avenues too, right? And it's all over the spectrum. You've got students who feel like they are drowning in work and students who are bored and understimulated, right? And they're responding to the exact same curriculum, by the way. So it's really, how do you differentiate for those students to create manageable, balanced work streams and to set their expectations for what those work streams would look like. The third key piece that I think with online education is essential to success is that project-based component. And in fairness, as Julia said, we've got a bias. Avenues the World School is deeply invested in project-based learning as an approach. So I think we are all pretty heavily bought in. But I do think project-based learning is especially essential when we're talking about online because it gets kids out from behind their computer screens, right? It says, okay, here's how you can use the technology to facilitate and to mediate an experience out in the world. And I think that's really optimal when we're talking about building online education programs, because if you're not getting kids out from behind their computer screens, you've got a major problem on your hands. That said, I think project-based learning needs to look very different in an online setting than it would in a brick and mortar environment. It requires a great deal more structure to guide students through because, as Julia kind of mentioned, you know, when projects feel boundless and limitless and they could go on forever and ever, that is very difficult to navigate in an online space where you only have a couple touch points with the teacher. And you don't want to reach out and you don't know where it's all going and it's really confusing and that feels quite demotivating for our students. So putting a great deal more structure on project-based learning, I think, is an essential component to success for online project-based learning. And then finally, again, kind of building off of Julia's point here as well, having a one-stop shop interface where everything is just in one centralized location makes such a difference, not just for students, for parents who are trying to get their heads around their child's academic progress, for teachers who are trying to put together compelling lessons that students can follow along with asynchronously. It makes such a huge difference. And we have been unbelievably fortunate with Avenues Online to have an in-house development team who's been able to build us exactly that kind of bespoke proprietary interface that collects that curriculum and is designed specifically to support it. And as I say, that is quite a blessing that I do not want to minimize, but I do think it is optimal for an online education program. So without further ado, I think you should probably see our lovely proprietary interface, but I want to call out a couple of things to look out for in that interface, which are the things that I believe online education can do best. We all know that there are things that happen in a brick and mortar school that simply don't translate to an online space. But I think the opposite is true too. I think there are things that online education actually is better at than brick and mortar schools may be. And I think that is a cause for hope in a moment that I know is so challenging for all of us, to look for those opportunities of what can we learn from this, and what can we bring back to our classrooms, and what can we do better in brick and mortar spaces, and where can we utilize the online tools that we're building real facility with. So to that end, I think things like executive functions and creativity, time management, schools, we hand a kid a schedule on the first day, and they know that they go to math class at 10 a.m. in room 704, and then that's it. Right? They memorize their schedule, and that's just what they do for the rest of the year. With online, we can really empower them to build their own schedules that are personalized and tailored to their needs, that are driven by self-awareness and a kind of metacognitive approach, where kids can really get great at communication and feedback and developing a plan, creating standards of accountability for themselves. So I think those are some of the really exciting possibilities that online can bring into our schools. And as I say, I think Avenues Online exemplifies so many of those things that it would be best to check out some examples. Without further ado, I shall hand it off to my colleague, Amy.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. So yes, I'm going to do a very quick demo of the Avenues Online interface, just so that everyone can get a chance to see what all of this looks like in real time. Again, to underscore, what we are about to show you is what you can accomplish when you have tremendous resources, including an in-house web development team, a research and development department, and tremendous resources to build a proprietary curriculum entirely from scratch, designed to be delivered online. So again, not everyone has that kind of runway. And again, what you're about to see is the result of several years of work with multiple teams of people. So let me move over into that demo. Okay, so this is what an Avenues Online student will see when they come to school. So what we're showing you right now is a test student. This is not a real student. So this is Jeremy Test, and he is in the 8th grade at Avenues Online. And I'll just sort of walk you through this interface step by step. So on the left-hand side is where we have queued up everything that this student needs to know and needs to do to manage his day and his week. So we pre-populate a to-do list, and that lists all of this student's courses that he is currently enrolled in. And as an 8th grader at Avenues Online, he is enrolled in Great Works. That is our core course that is, again, interdisciplinary and project-based. It brings together the humanities, so it will count as a student's English course, social studies course, and also STEAM. So in addition to English and social studies, this is also a student's science, engineering, technology, art course. There is math built into these projects as well, but as you will also see, the student has a separate math course. Global Passport is our foreign language program, and then HIP and WIP are two asynchronous sort of specialized programs that we run. They are a marginal part of the student's schedule, but they do factor into our curriculum. So again, the piece to highlight here is fewer courses, all consolidated into one place where students are able to access them. If you scroll down, we do use Google Suite. So the student's Google Calendar is synced to their interface, so they can see all of their courses for the day, including the Zoom link that they would click on in order to access their virtual classroom, which includes a cohort of students that they meet with on a regular basis, as well as the teacher who conducts that class on a regular basis. So you can see that this student has about 2 hours of scheduled synchronous time. So this is an 8th grader, 2 hours of scheduled synchronous time. We don't like students to be online for more than 2 hours a day, to go back to that question of how do we get kids off their computers. So we schedule them for about 2 hours a day in class time, and then our project-based curriculum allows them to get off their computers and go work on other things. Again, here you can see Ms. Rosenberg's office hours are there for a student to check in with that teacher if they would choose. And then we have some optional PE time in the afternoon. So that's a fairly typical schedule for any given day. Now, you can't see it on here because Jeremy is a test student, but this message thread is populated whenever a teacher gives a student feedback on their work. So as I will show you, all feedback funnels through the interface. It is all categorized and archived with the student's work for that particular project. And anytime a student has received feedback, the message thread will populate and a student can click right on that thread and be taken automatically to the project and to the teacher's specific feedback. It's worth saying also parents have the same view and their own login to their child's interface. So a parent can come on here and see immediately, what does my child have today for classes? What time are those meetings? Have they received any feedback from teachers? So it's all very well organized and entirely transparent. So if we move over into the Great Works course, again, this is the core course and has the most credit and the most subjects sort of packed into it. We organize everything, so this is a Unit 8. We organize everything around a set of paired texts, one in the humanities, one in STEAM. And then so students are constantly reading these two books as they go through the unit. These books are in dialogue with each other, again, intentionally paired. And then students are doing projects associated each week with the book that they're reading. So in order to know what a student is doing in any given week, on Sunday night, the assignments for that week will light up and be outlined in black. So any tile, anytime you look on the interface and a tile is outlined in black, that means that is that student's work for that particular week. In this case, these are all previous tiles from previous weeks, and these are future tiles for future weeks. So there's this week and then one more week left in this unit, and then a new unit will populate this student's page, which will go until the end of the school year. So again, the consistency of delivery is something that we would like to highlight. So regardless of which class a student is in, so I'll go ahead and click over to math really quickly, the same system is followed. So if we scroll down on math, we find the highlighted tile. That is that student's math assignment for this week. Again, and the same thing is true in foreign language and all of the other courses. Very easy for parents, very easy for kids. Also, all of the courses are synchronized in the sense that whenever a tile is highlighted, it gets highlighted on a Sunday night. All of that work is due on Friday. There are no exceptions, and that is true for every single course. Again, very easy for parents to follow the curriculum. They never have to ask their kid or wonder, when is this due? Has a due date been changed? We keep this structure of these week-long projects, week-long deliverables, week-long reading assignments, because that's the best way for kids to learn how to manage their time and for things to not get extended, like Julia was talking about, these extended projects that start to become unwieldy and kids start to lose their focus and they're just challenging to keep track of. All right, so if we click on a project, actually let's click over here. So we'll go ahead and look at a STEAM project right now. But again, everything is set up in a similar way. So if we click on this project, this is related to Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma. And for every project, students will find all of the instructional videos they need pre-populated in this carousel. So anything that students are supposed to watch throughout the course of the week while working on the project is linked directly right here. They will then find an introduction to their project. So in this case, they are learning about type 2 diabetes. Associated with that, they are diving into the science of the digestive system and how metabolism works. So those are the science learning goals for this particular unit. Some number of steps, usually between 5 and 8, are here, and all of them are very intentionally designed to lead students to their final deliverable for Friday. What we have done is basically project manage that deliverable for the student and broken it down into discrete steps. that are manageable, that are understandable, and they are broken down into steps that allow students to submit work in increments so they can get feedback from their teacher over the course of the week. They will be able to see the connection between every step and the final project that they are ultimately submitting. This speaks to that question of compliance-like work, work that feels perfunctory or shallow that students are sometimes experiencing now, where teachers, in doing their very best to try to push a classroom-based curriculum out to students, there may not be a good sense from students of why am I doing this particular assignment. Students in this interface never have to wonder about that because the entire week is right in front of them. So for example, we can click on step 1, and this is really about students watching some of those instructional videos, getting a good solid foundation about the digestive system and metabolism. And then we have students making a brief video demonstrating what they learned from the videos that they watched. They're learning about carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and fats, and how they work in the metabolic process. Right in the interface, right in that step, here is where a student will upload a video. So again, everything is organized and everything stays organized so that when they go to the next step, they can start working on this and wait for feedback from a faculty member. You can't see it right here, but underneath each step, there's an opportunity for teachers to put that feedback. So if they, on the front page, on the home page, if they click on that link where there says feedback, it will take them right to this thread that will develop underneath each step with feedback from their teachers. So they will keep going over the course of the week. Here again, they're diving now into the specifics of how carbohydrates are metabolized with relationship to the development of diabetes. If there are additional resources that we want students to use in their project, we will link them right here. So there is just in-time delivery of these resources, as opposed to having sort of a separate page where students might just have a huge list of things they're supposed to reference, but not entirely know when they're supposed to access that material. And then again, the last step is always putting it all together, that final deliverable, which again is always uploaded at the very end of the project. So that is how we organize things in our particular interface. Similarly, we do have students do book clubs. So these are guided reading questions associated with the book that they're reading. And just to highlight again, all of those are in Google Docs. So we're able to click right here. Immediately, a student can access their personalized copy of that worksheet, and then they are able to type their responses directly into their worksheet and submit it at the same time. So that is how that works. Try to get rid of that. Perfect. Okay. Let me just show you also really quickly how we do math, because it is a little bit different. We, again, with our in-house development team, have created specialized math notebooks. So when a teacher, when a student opens up their math notebook, all of their problems for the week are actually populated at the top of their screen. They are going to have an iPad and an Apple Pencil. They will pull up this exact screen on an iPad, which allows them to actually solve the problem using their Apple Pencil in this white space, right? So this is writable space. So the kids are able to put all their work on a page. Teachers can then come in with a different color ink, provide students with feedback on their problem solving, drop in videos, drop in text messages, sticky notes to help move kids along in terms of their problem solving. And you can see right here, anywhere in the interface, if there is an exclamation point, it means a student has received feedback from their teacher on that particular item. So at the end of the week, all of these boxes would be checked because a teacher would have had an opportunity to take a look at all of them. The other thing I wanted to highlight is that we go out of our way to make sure that parents and kids know exactly how kids are doing in any given project. So letter grades are displayed prominently on the tiles. We sort of take a different approach in the sense that some schools have really pulled back from letter grades. Our approach is that if you throw a lot of letter grades out there, no one letter grade causes particular anxiety for a student. So it's one of those things where if we throw more at it, then students don't have to get quite so worried about any one particular grade. But this allows parents and kids to see exactly how kids are doing. Similarly, if we click on this project, well, that won't quite show us. But there will be, I think we can see this in a foreign language. The tiles have different codes on them. So obviously, if a student has a letter grade, that project has been done in its entirety, submitted, graded, has received feedback. If a student has an open dot, that means it's partially submitted, right? So parents can look at that and say, oh, what happened? You have step 3, 1, 2, and 3 done. What happened to step 4 and 5, right? So parents can see that very quickly. Similarly, if there is a black dot, it means a project has been submitted in its entirety, but it is just awaiting a grade. So again, if it is Saturday morning and you are looking at some of these tiles, you would say, hey, Jeremy, what happened? That didn't get submitted. You could look at breaking news and say, yep, nice work. You don't need to work on anything else for Global Passport over the weekend. All right. Okay, so that's the general overview that I wanted to provide, again, without getting too far in the weeds of the specific Avenues curriculum, and I just give an opportunity for everyone to see that interface. So let's go back here, and great. So here's the contact information for all of us. We welcome you to reach out if you are interested in learning more about how Avenues Online has built its curriculum and what we offer. You can access information about Avenues Online here. But again, we really welcome hearing from anyone. And I think we wanted to give an opportunity to ask some questions here. Before we do that, I just want to advance one more slide. Avenues is actually hosting a global open ed event tonight. So if you have enjoyed hearing about the ways that we have structured our online school, we do have a webinar tonight that is open to the public talking about the first principles of online learning. So some of the educators that we have been working with, had the pleasure to work with over the last few years, will be there discussing our approach to online learning, and you can access that at this link down here. Hand it over for any questions.
I think the way that we're going to do the last 10 minutes, I think we have about 10 minutes for questions, is I know that people have been putting questions in the chat. So if you do that, I will just, Rebecca and I will go through and see which ones that we can potentially answer. And we will actually ask you to unmute yourself and ask your question out loud so everyone can hear your voice. And I am seeing that Halima, hope I'm pronouncing that right, Halima, is asking how does, well, you know what? I'm going to let Halima ask her question.
Hi there. So I'm the educational director of a ISAGME preschool in Lower Manhattan, and I wondered what this might look like for the very youngest children. Kindergarten, 5 years old, up to about 3rd grade.
It is such a good question. Right now, Avenues Online is a 6th through 12th grade program officially, but we are currently in process of building out our T to 5 program. So that will include a 2s program, a 3s program, a pre-K, and then K all the way through 5. So we're in process of developing that. It is still early days, and we're still thinking through some of the ways that that might look and be structured. I think needless to say, any curriculum for our youngest students will need to be fairly heavily parent mediated. To that end, one of the big investments that we're making in building out that from a curriculum design perspective is building out a parent education program that runs in parallel with the student-facing curriculum. So every time we're giving something that's student-facing, we've got something that's parent-facing that complements it, so that we're really syncing that all the way down the line. So that's one of the biggest priorities we've got in building that work out.
Okay, thank you. How will you negotiate time management for those families? I mean, if the parents are facilitating most of the projects, how do we justify our tuition?
That's also a very reasonable question. It will not be exclusively parent mediated, but it is the case, I think, as any of us know, right? You can't put a 4-year-old in front of an iPad and expect them to learn independently in the way that a 16-year-old could.
Right.
So I think to some extent that is just an acknowledgement that we all need to make. But I think there are a couple of key ways that we can work to improve that. Again, just from a curriculum perspective, I think the more modular the curriculum, the better. So what we're focusing on is effectively presenting a menu of activities that needn't be done in any particular order. And then that really lets the child be the leader of their own learning and say, okay, I want story time, right? So you're going to do your read aloud. And instead of saying, oh, you know what, it's 10:30, we gotta go do your cognitive activity for the day. The kid wants to read the story 15 times. Let's read it 15 times. If the child falls in love with the social emotional activity for the week and they want to do that 15 times, terrific. Let's let them do that. Let's encourage it. And keeping things modular enough that you can really let the child take the lead in that regard. So that's one of the strategies that we're employing there. To help manage just on the parent end of things, right? How overwhelming it can be to walk your kid through something when it's too rigid and it's too step by step and you don't have that flexibility and that modularity. It's quite daunting for a family, I think, to survive that.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
I think we have a question. Well, we have a couple of raised hands. So I know a few folks know that little participant trick of raising your hand, but would appreciate it if you could actually put the comment in the chat. But while you're doing that, I noticed that Derek has a question. I'm gonna let Derek actually ask his question.
Hi, everyone. I was just wondering, I work in research for Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and we do a lot of SEL interventions in public schools. And I was just wondering how you've incorporated social emotional learning into your platform. And along with that, what are some of your observations among your students as it relates specifically to things like communication and empathy building?
So we actually, one of the programs that I skipped over, HIP, so HIP is high intensity practice. And that is actually our metacognitive curriculum. So we have developed a program specifically designed to help develop empathy, creativity, flexible thinking in students. So that is something that we offer on every Avenues campus, including Avenues Online. In terms of students developing their communication skills in particular, that's actually something that I think we are quite good at. So we have students presenting work in a variety of different modalities. So we have video uploads that students do quite frequently. So they are really able to polish their presentation skills. The synchronous time with teachers is often an opportunity for students to share out their work and get feedback from not just teachers, but peers. So peers are developing that ability to actually give constructive feedback to other people in their cohort. And then we actually have a really interesting math program in the sense that I didn't dive into that specifically, but it is discussion based, right? Just like you would have a roundtable discussion about a book, we have roundtable discussions about math problems. So that ability to use the online space, again, to develop discussion-based skills, which are simultaneously developing listening skills, right? The ability to stop and speak well, as well as the ability to stop and listen well at the same time, and have the impulse control to listen and not speak all the time. Those are things you can practice with students in Zoom calls, just like you do in a brick and mortar classroom. The difference being on Zoom, you can actually mute children, and you don't have the luxury of being able to do that in a brick and mortar classroom, though if anyone who's a teacher knows you wish you could do that sometimes. So that is something that we are able to do, though we try not to do that. That's not benefiting a student's learning. And then we do have advisory groups. We have opportunities to build community online. We have clubs. So it's amazing actually how quickly kids adapt to this modality. It feels very natural to them in ways that oftentimes take the adults by surprise.
I see a question from Carol. She had a question about relationships.
Yeah, thanks. This is totally new to me, so I'm not a teacher, but I deal with teachers. Um, um, where are the relationships that we see in, you know, in a regular brick and mortar? Where do the kids get that part of learning? Yeah, I hear you use the word cohort. I don't know what that is either.
Sure, sure. So students attend class in cohorts of about 5 to 8 right now, depending upon their age level. And because they're working on projects, that cohort time with their peers is really an opportunity to collaborate. So there is an opportunity and for independent work and independent learning in our program, but we also really try to emphasize collaborative opportunities. So when kids come together in that synchronous time, teachers will pair them up or they will work in groups. And oftentimes kids will submit videos that they've worked on for their final deliverable that will include multiple kids from their cohort. And that happens regularly. So we actually found out, it became obvious to us that the kids were all scheduling their own Zoom calls and doing their own meetings because they had all these inside jokes that they were sharing during class. So again, the kids fall into this quite naturally. So we don't worry as much about the kids. I think as head of school, I sometimes worry more about the faculty because I think if you're a teacher who just loves the energy and excitement of a school building and the craziness of the cafeteria and the hallways, and that's what energizes you, it can be hard to be in an online school where you feel a lot of distance with the kids. So I would say that our faculty are self-selecting in a lot of ways. They are teachers who really find that they build relationships with kids through those one-on-one conversations that happen in office hours, deep discussions, and intellectual mentorship with regard to the academics. I would say that all of our kids have teachers they feel close to, who they reach out to write recommendations for them for summer programs and various other things. So it is not for everyone. It is not for every student, and it is not for every teacher. But for those that it is a good match for, it can work extremely well.
Can I just follow that up? So what I'm hearing you say is that there are relationships built, but they're all, they're not one-on-one, person to person, right? So in other words, if you were a parent or an administrator, there would be other ways that you would have to seek out if you wanted to have, for example, you know, just playing together and that's not structured. You know, where do they learn those kinds of skills is my question, I guess.
Sure, and I think that depends a lot about the age of the kids. Our middle grades kids started their own charades night because they're all cooped up and getting antsy, and so they just started this night to play charades with each other. So I think the older kids, again, they're really comfortable with this kind of modality. Our clubs online, the kids are working on things together. It works really well for them. For the younger students, there does need to be more facilitation. And as we grow as a school, you know, most online schools try to find and facilitate opportunities to take kids in similar geographic locations and create opportunities for meetups and get-togethers and field trips and those sorts of things. So when we do have critical mass of children in a geographical area, we do facilitate that with parents and things like that.